Welcome to Conversations. I am Muqtadar Khan, your host. And as you see with me, I have a very distinguished diplomat, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, who has served India for more than 3 decades. He was he was the ambassador of India in Saudi Arabia, in many of the Middle Eastern countries. He also served as additional secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He is also a scholar who has written several books. If you look at my shoulder right there, you can see West Asia at War.
I can see that.
That is an important book. I have often used it in my Middle Eastern studies classes. So, Ambassador Saab, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you very much.
Sir, I think in the last few weeks since we last spoke, there have been some seismic changes in world politics. Donald Trump seems to have one instrument with which he's completely upending the global order. But the biggest and the most surprising thing that he has done in the past few weeks is completely undermine a relationship with India that people have been developing for the last 25 years since Americans dated to Clinton's visit to India, which was even before this century. So the question is that we seem to be seeing certain moves made both by the US as well as India. India's apparent diplomatic pivot towards Russia, India, China. Wang Yi's visit to India. The Prime Minister Modi is visiting China after 7 years. And there's a lot of chatter about it that India is rethinking its options, is trying to strengthen its relationship with Russia. In fact, day before yesterday, when Wang Yi was meeting Prime Minister Modi, Dr. Jaishankar was meeting Putin. So it kind of sends these symbolic signals. Unfortunately, none of those permeate Donald Trump's thinking. But my question to you is: are we at a moment in history where India is perhaps completely thinking of altering its foreign policy?
I would say to you that we are in a gray zone as far as India's global approach is concerned. It's a period of uncertainty. It's a period of introspection, and it is a period that requires a lot of reflection and gravitas. We cannot accuse Donald Trump of gravitas. I don't think he has a substantial intellectual base. I don't think he's a particularly reflective individual. He acts according to instinct, but is overwhelmingly self-centered and wants global attention upon himself. He's an instinctive person. Many of the things that he has initiated, I don't think they are a product of reflection or indeed of a well thought out policy. He has tariff in his mind, but he has applied the weapon of tariff very unevenly. A large number of countries have got away with certain bonuses from the American side, and certain others, like India, have been very severely penalized. And of course, the second part, the penal 25%, is to be announced on 27th August, and we are not sure whether it will go through or not. But the main point is that I think a lot of damage has already been done. Let me say one thing to you, and this is very important. I welcome it. I welcome this development because for the first time in several years, several people who in Delhi were pushing the government, earlier of Dr. Manmohan Singh and now of Mr. Narendra Modi, towards the American embrace. This effort was made by a very large number of people within the United States, most of them of Indian origin, and their lackeys in India. I think that will now stop, and that I welcome. We had wandered into this embrace with the United States calculatedly during the Manmohan scenario and a little less thoughtfully during the Modi era. That will now come to an end. What we will now recover, I feel and I hope, is that we will finally genuinely affirm a foreign policy that is based on a moral compass and a foreign policy that is founded on a strategic vision.
I so there are you can have a broad vision, and then once you start executing it, you start meeting some challenges. So for example, both Dr. Jaishankar and Prime Minister Modi have said something which I find quite stunning, actually. First, Dr. Jaishankar made this comment after meeting Xi Jinping when he went for the SCO foreign ministers meeting. And then Prime Minister Modi made this comment on his Twitter account after meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. This is what they said: that since the meeting of Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi in Kazan, that was last October, India-China relations have been improving steadily. And to me, that is stunning because it appears as if they are suffering from some kind of temporary amnesia about China's role in Operation Sindoor. During Operation Sindoor, China came out no other country was, if there was a third party involvement, it was the Chinese who were in real time supporting Pakistan, providing Pakistan with intelligence. They had sent in weapons before Operation Sindoor. They used that battlefield as a laboratory to study India. And I would consider all of these moves as pretty hostile. And now, because Donald Trump is pushing India and pressuring India, and to some extent even trolling India, is India now forced into a situation where it has to overlook what other countries are doing in order to improve its relations with them? Is this too quick a reaction to move so quickly towards Russia or China? Or should India, basically slow down everything, put everything in slow motion and sit out Donald Trump before it can do a proper assessment of the geopolitical realities of the world and carve out a path for it?
I think what you are looking at is a fresh Indian understanding and approach to what you have called the reality of the world order. We seem to have missed it. When I will explain to you my own perspective, and that is as follows. In the first decade of this century, there was a lot of confidence in India with regard to its place in the world. And India was talking very robustly about a multipolar world order. And this would be a world order where India would play a very important role in shaping it and seeing it through. I feel that around that time, 2011, 2012, there was a realization in sections of the Indian elite that the divide between China and India has now increased a lot in terms of national capacity. China was then suddenly, it seemed to have occurred to us that in 1980 we were on par as far as economic achievement is concerned, and now there was a gap of 5 times. There was an asymmetry. This became the way this led to the revival of the two lobbies that I mentioned, the lobby in the United States and the lobby in India, to work very quickly, very robustly to push India towards the American embrace. They used to use the euphemism of strategic partnership, but as you know, United States doesn't have strategic partnership. It has allies, which I have used the word subsidiary allies. What Wellesley had created in India, United States has no allies who are equal. There
Yeah.
is no mutual respect as far as the United States is concerned in terms of the people who are on its side. It treats many of its friends actually with supreme contempt, as you have seen very recently
Sure.
in terms of what Donald Trump is doing now and what his predecessors have done earlier, a little more subtly. What happened at that time is there was a lurch, a dramatic lurch in favor of building relationship with the Americans. And this was in order to, it was like a panicky reaction, a knee jerk reaction in order to obtain a degree of strategic confidence in New Delhi. Four agreements on interoperability were signed with the Americans, intelligence cooperation was agreed to, and numerous engagements took place. Then, through the Modi era, there was back a certain sense that the Americans are with us. People like me frequently, and many others, frequently reminded the government that the United States is not your friend, it is not your partner. United States works only for the United States. To the extent that you are supporting their agenda at any time, they are with you. Otherwise, they are not. Because they are a superpower. They have an agenda that is global in character. And because they have elections every 2 years and a presidential election every 4 years, their policies constantly swing across the arc from left to right. They are unpredictable and inherently unreliable. This point was missed in India. What is now what you are looking at and what you thought that we are acting somewhat hastily is not haste. It is a self correction. It is a robust correction. We lost our way and we are now finding it back again, reminding ourselves that we have always supported strategic autonomy. We earlier from 1947 till now we have had, you can call it non-alignment as our core policy earlier, strategic autonomy after that, you can put any word. But India is now finally affirming that it is an independent nation. It is not subordinate to the whims of other countries. Yes, we have made mistakes in the past and we regret them, but we are now back in action as a country, totally self confident and engaging with the rest of the world on the basis of terms that serve India's interest, not somebody else's.
So the United States, I mean, the conditions that you have described, other than Donald Trump's peculiarities and eccentricities, are not new. I mean, we have known this that Americans' strategic vision is often very short. Most presidents come in the hope of winning a second term, and so it is basically at best a 6-year vision, because they usually end up becoming lame duck presidents in the last 2 years. But there has been a consistency, isn't it, in the United States nurturing of its efforts to nurture, starting with Clinton and then George Bush's significant nuclear understanding with India. And subsequently, in fact, Joe Biden, for example, I think was perhaps the most India-friendly, Modi-friendly president US has had in a long time. But from what you're saying is that the current rethinking that is taking place in Delhi is going to be of a profounder nature, and it's not going to be reactionary or short term. So hypothetically, if we do elect a president who is like, let's say, a Biden clone when it comes to India in 2028, you think that India will not come back into the fold of the United States as Narendra Modi was for the last 5 years?
I want to remind you, Professor, what you have sketched as an American outreach to India, which started from the 1990s, was overwhelmingly motivated by getting India into the American camp.
Yes.
India had been that recalcitrant player in world affairs, despite all the pressures that the Americans exerted upon us and the betrayals that we experienced, the solid military support that was given to Pakistan, and the condoning of Pakistan's terrorism against India. Their attempt now was once and for all, let us get India into our camp. Whatever happened right from the 1990s, this was the core interest. Very often, the pro American camp will tell you that the United States was committed to making India a great power. Possibly it was. I don't mind, and I don't believe it. But even if I assume that were true, it was entirely motivated by getting India onto their side. Why did this thing not happen? Periodically, the American enterprise would meet certain roadblocks, and that roadblock was consistently Pakistan. When you had the first event where you had in the cold after the Cold War, when we had the when we had 9/11,
Yeah.
Pakistan was co-opted as a partner, but it was a Faustian bargain in that Pakistan betrayed the Taliban at that time and handed over Afghanistan to the American armed forces, but retained the right to carry out cross border terror in India. Witness recall here after 9/11, the attacks on the Kashmir Assembly and the attack on the Indian Parliament. What did the Americans do? They retained the priority of their ties with Pakistan. Go a little further, the attack on Mumbai. Again, at that time, George Bush Jr. was trying to build a strategic partnership with India, but it cracked against this rock because India insisted that you must now name Pakistan as a terror, as a source of terror, and you must build the relationship with India on this basis. It did not happen. Pakistan was required by the Americans as their support base at that time in Afghanistan, and this has been a pattern. Therefore, I do not attach any importance. In the second decade, there was the ogre of China, and there was this mantra which was constantly being articulated both by sections in India as well as in the United States, that India needs to be a partner with the United States because we are part of the United States rebalancing against China. And I was a skeptic. I was asking myself, the Americans don't need India as a rebalancer. They have enough military capabilities to confront China either in the South China Sea or in regard to Taiwan or in regard to Japan or Korea. They wanted India firmly in their camp as a political and diplomatic requirement. It was not China centric, but this is the way it was sold to us. I'm not going to pretend to you that what is happening now is likely to be sustained. I don't know. I would like it to be. I want the government I want the government in India. I want senior officials in India. I want Indian public opinion to once again see that the Americans are not your security partners. They are in it to see what advantage they can reap for themselves. Recall here what happened in Ladakh. While we were singing the song of Quad, we had this serious problem at our border. Where were the Americans at that time? I had argued then, and I do so now, that you have to face the challenge of China on your own. There is no other player who is going to come and do your fighting for you. It's a challenge. It's a diplomatic challenge, a political challenge, a military challenge, an economic challenge. It is a challenge that you have to prepare yourself for. And Quad is not the answer, and the United States certainly is not the answer. So what I am agitating for is that I would like this wisdom to finally penetrate the councils that matter in New Delhi, and we once again affirm our commitment to strategic autonomy and regain our self confidence and work for a multipolar world order, regardless of what is said by various Indian origin people lurking in various corridors of the United States.
Uh, I do want to push back a little bit on this. So, for example, why was it not apparent to all these brilliant people in Delhi that America has never looked at India as India? It has looked at India first through the lens of Indo-Pak issues and then Indo-China issues. So India is not the primary concern, apparently, for the US in the last 25 years. They always looked at it through the window of either the Cold War or through the Pakistan-India issues. And then now China. India is important only because China is rising and challenging the United States. If China had not grown so fast, so quickly, then there would have been no pressure in Washington to improve relations. It doesn't it signal that there is nothing intrinsic? Like, for example, after Pahalgam, I don't know whether you saw the Marco Rubio's confirmation. In that, he did bring up this whole idea of quote unquote Islamic terrorism is one of his big things. He's always said that repeatedly, that this is one of the biggest threat to America that we need to fight. So Pahalgam was a great opportunity, as to he could have sent a very senior American diplomat or himself come to India at that time. And it would have completely changed things significantly. It would have been a very different way to do it. And I was quite surprised by the failure of the Trump administration to grasp. And to me, that sent the signal that, oh my God, they don't intrinsically care for India the way they care for Israel or Ukraine or any other European country. But there's also one more thing that I do want to ask you is that, is it possible that Donald Trump has downgraded the strategic necessity? Because, one mantra that was floating around was America needs India, India does not need America. But has Donald Trump realized this, or has he reached this instinctively that, oh, I don't need India as a strategic partner, and therefore I can afford to upset them?
You mentioned many points, and let me address them one by one. During the Cold War, the United States from time to time made attempts to win over India, particularly in 47, 48, when they tried to subvert the government of Nehru and replace it with some other person, and then constantly pressurized India by arming Pakistan in 65 and 71. But I think there was a conviction in the United States that India cannot be bought and cannot be won over. Hence, the extreme hostility that was exhibited towards India by Nixon and by Kissinger, and the bad language that they used from time to time against our leader. Post Cold War, the Americans felt that a new scenario had emerged, and this would be a good time to pull India into the American embrace. And you remember that at that time, after we had tested our nuclear weapon, then there were certain sanctions imposed upon us. The Americans used that occasion to reach out to us. And Strobe Talbot and Jaswant Singh Ji had a very large number of conversations to build up the relationship. And they moved forward on the basis of the nuclear agreement. At that time, my understanding is that possibly India had wanted a reform of the Security Council. The Americans were not willing to give that, but they gave what they called the second best, and that was the nuclear apartheid was relaxed in favor of India. But the entire game plan, right from the 1990s up to 2021, let us say, was to win India over. But it was never going to be at the expense of their relations with Pakistan. From time to time, Pakistan reminded the Americans of its tactical value. It did not have any more a strategic value after the Cold War. But post 9/11, the General Musharraf was able to tell the Americans that you need us in Afghanistan. You don't know anybody in Afghanistan, and I know everything. I know all of the people there. And as you know, for 20 years, the Americans spent what? $1 or $2 trillion in Afghanistan, but ever entirely dependent on the Pakistanis. When they withdrew from Afghanistan, they treated Pakistan with contempt and built up a relationship, rebuilt the relationship with India. But once again, they now need Pakistan for various reasons, some of them rather commercial and crass, like rare earths and cryptocurrency, and possibly something more strategic in character vis a vis Iran. We will see. But the fact is, once again, when they have a weak card, the Pakistanis have reminded the Americans of their value, and the Americans have leapt forward. The Americans use this card quite well. When they seem to be on the back foot, they are able to inveigle themselves in the US establishment. They have a relationship that goes back 70 or 80 years. with the CIA and with the Pentagon. They may not have that relationship with the White House or with the State Department, but they have it with the Pentagon and with the CIA, and they have certain elements within the US establishment who are able to promote their interests. What has happened just now is still wide open, and I don't wish to speculate about it. Now, the other thing that has happened is that while the Americans, like Mr. Biden, etc., thought that they could win India over, I think that again it was supposed to be connected with China. But the Americans have a very complex relationship because they are a superpower. They have a different relationship with the Russians, they have a different relationship with the Chinese. And you know the kind of relationship that Biden had with Russia. At that time, he was extremely hostile to Russia. And we were hearing from Washington that they are going to debilitate the Russian
Yeah,
military
becoming.
capacity. And they were, but Donald Trump, on the other hand, had been earlier extremely hostile to the Chinese. As of now, we don't know because the president is extremely unpredictable. His attention span is very limited. He can change his position by the minute. But as of now, I think he would like to have a deal with the Chinese on the trade matter. I am not sure which way it will go forward. Many of the points that Donald Trump has taken credit for as having solved, most of them I think are still wide open and they have gone nowhere. This obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize is also, I think, complicating matters in the White House and in Washington to the detriment of American policymakers, I would say. As
Yes,
as
I
of
agree.
now, I'm not sure that there is anything long term or thought out from the American side. They lurch from policy to policy depending on objective circumstances at a particular time, to have no long term view or vision and constantly find themselves in a serious mess.
Ambassador Saab, the Republicans are now being booed in their own constituencies. They are scared to death to have a public meeting or a town hall meeting because the Republican voters are coming and booing them because of Donald Trump's policies. And I think President Trump has a kind of an inferiority complex towards Obama. And so, if you remember the first time, Obama had kind of made fun of Trump by saying, I won it 2 times. And so now Trump has won it 2 times, and he thinks the only way he'll be equal to Obama is if he also wins a Nobel Prize. And of course, Obama got Nobel Prize for doing nothing, whereas Trump hopes that he can, pretend to have orchestrated ceasefires. But I want to ask you a question. I had a conversation with a very senior retired Indian diplomat, and for my viewers, that diplomat has never been on my show, so don't try to guess who it is. He told me something very interesting. He said that in the past few years, there was a slight change in Indian foreign policy making. Often ideas, policy suggestions would come from ambassadors or come up from the Indian Foreign Service, and then they would go to the minister. Then those ideas would then be bounced off the prime minister, and then, the policy would change. He said, but recently, a lot of those ideas on foreign policy are coming directly from from the prime minister's office, and he made an interesting observation, and he says, and the spellings are the documents that come in with those ideas. The spellings are American English spellings, clearly hinting that there is a constituency of Indian Americans who are trying to have too much influence on Indian foreign policy. But we see absolutely nothing happening from the Indian American community. I think I'm the only guy other than Fareed Zakaria who's criticizing Donald Trump on his approach to India or any other issues. Otherwise, the Indian lobby or so-called Indian constituency here in the US is very, very quiet. I think they still want to have positive relations with the US, and they are hoping that this Trump fever will fade away.
May I make an observation, Professor?
Sure. Go ahead.
The Indian origin people in the United States, like large parts of the diaspora in other places, other developed countries, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, overwhelmingly have American passports. They take passports of the local country.
Yeah.
As a result, let us be very clear on this. their primary loyalties lie with the country that has adopted them. They sing the song of the adopted country, not of India. But because they look Indian and they speak Indian languages, they use their origin to inveigle themselves into Indian councils. I suspect, I do not know whether how policy is being made. I have not heard anything of the kind that you have mentioned. Prime ministers, let me assure you, right from the time of Nehru till today, have had a large number of people who get their attention and whisper things to them. So it is not something unique or novel. Once one of my ambassadors told me, "Let us be very objective here. The ambassador is neither the sole nor even the most important source of information for the political leadership at home." In the case of our present leadership, they obviously have a very close connection with the diaspora in the United States and in UK and Canada and other places, which is very natural, given that many of them come from Gujarat. And it is very possible that some of them have access to the powers that be. And obviously, the kind of notes that they would give would be those that would support constituencies they would support American interests. I'm not shocked by this. I would take it for granted. This is not only community leaders, there would be think tank people, there are people who are in universities, in government, all of them. There and they I support it. I do not expect an Indian origin person who has picked up an American passport to be loyal to India over his adopted country. I would expect him and I would want him to be loyal to the United States. Let us be very clear here. The mistake is on our part at home. We foolishly believe that these people who look like Indians and speak like Indians are still Indians. They are not. Let me be very clear. They are not. The only sections of the diaspora who are Indian and remain Indian are those who have retained their Indian passport and they overwhelmingly live in the Gulf and a few other countries. All the others who have picked up alternative passports are loyal to the countries of their origin. Therefore, if there are sections from your country today agitating for the attention of the government and trying to get some plus points from India, I don't blame them for trying, but I can assure them that they will get no support from people like me. I don't believe in this diaspora business. You have chosen, you have made a choice, stick with it.
Yeah,
But
I
they
agree
are
with you.
constantly inveigling them. They seek to get an importance in American councils on the basis of their Indian origin so that they can report back and say, I got this for the Americans. I got this for the American administration. I don't believe any of that. I have lived among communities. I have served in the UK. I have served in the United States. And I'm speaking with complete confidence here that for me, the only person who matters is the person who is is still an Indian national and therefore can be trusted to serve our nation. Anyone else who has picked up a foreign passport should be loyal to the American, and I would expect him to be loyal to the American.
I mean, they should be. Otherwise, they will be treated as a, if as an enemy. If relations with India go bad, I hope not. Then we have a similar situation with Chinese Americans right now, right? For Chinese Americans, it has become very difficult because they used to travel all the time to China. Now they become very suspicious. It becomes very difficult for them to get important positions in the government. The only place where it doesn't work is with the Israelis thing. So you could be an Israeli citizen and a member of Israeli defense services, etc., and still get senior positions in the US because we acknowledge dual citizenship. I think a lot of stuff that you were saying could go away if India had chosen the dual citizenship. But I don't want to digress there. I want to come back to Indian foreign policy issues. Do you think that India's focus on Pakistan beyond security issues, especially on diplomatic issues, etc., is also something that India needs to outgrow, or is it the is it? My point is that India's obsession obsessive focus on Pakistan and everything that goes on in Pakistan in its diplomacy is also something that perhaps hinders India's ability to develop its relations with other countries in the world, especially now with China, because Pakistan is like a vassal state of China to a great extent. And now, as India tries to improve its
Professor,
relations with
I want
China,
to correct you on one small point.
yes,
It is not India that is obsessed with Pakistan. It is Pakistan that is obsessed with India. You know, India has tried many times to rebuild fresh relations with Pakistan. And you are aware of all of them.
yeah,
Narasimha Rao tried it, Prime Minister Vajpayee did.
Modi
Dr.
also,
Manmohan Singh actually devoted his large part of his prime ministership to that. And again, to give credit to Mr. Modi, do recall how he had the SARC prime leaders at his the first
yeah,
oath taking, and then made a surprise visit to greet Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. And you know, we tried. But if you notice this pattern, with which we are very familiar in India, that every time there is a sense that that relations are going to improve, we have a horrendous event that sets back
was,
everything.
yeah,
You remember that, you know, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was trying to reach out to the Pakistanis, you had Kargil. When Dr. Manmohan Singh was trying to reach out to the Pakistanis, you had the Mumbai attack. Where Mr. Narendra Modi is concerned, we have had the attacks of Uri, and then the attacks of Pahalgam more recently, and in between the Balakot episode, etc. So it is Pakistan that is obsessed. It is not India. India, if I may say to you, and I'll say this very candidly, India would be quite ready for a positive relationship if we had the sense that Pakistan has genuinely changed, given up its affinity with extremism and violence, and becomes a normal country. There is nothing more that India would want is to have a country at its border that is quote unquote normal. But what we have found, and this upsets all of us, what we have found is that the Pakistani government has a very skewed arrangement in terms of which all the crucial aspects of state order are managed by the armed forces successively, and that the elected government looks after the economy and social affairs or what have you, has no stake in the crucial issues. And it is the armed force, and this is an assessment in India and not an authority on Pakistan. So I'll repeat what I've heard, that the assessment in India is that the Pakistani armed forces have a direct, sustained, and a vested interest in keeping relations with India on a very tense note, and constantly irritate India with these actions of violence. This is what prevents even a leader like Mr. Narendra Modi. My own conviction is that if we sense real change, now will this happen? I don't know. What the Americans have done, and I think this is a very great disservice to South Asia, that post Pahalgam, instead of being seriously concerned about what has happened, to be, you know, this is something you don't have to be pro India or pro Pakistan. If
sure,
you're just pro human, you will see that a large number of men, 25 men, killed after their religion is checked in the front of the eyes of their wives and their female members. Now, isn't this deliberately and mischievously provocative? Can by any scale, this be condoned? And yet, what does the American president do? He's busy taking credit for bringing a ceasefire into the subcontinent, number one. Number two, he invites the Pakistani armed forces chief, who is not the chief of the country, he's not the head of state or head of government, an armed forces chief to the White House, and indicate, and then gives Pakistan a very relaxed tariff, and it is of India that is being abused. So this is not acceptable. Even a president absent, without gravitas, without attention span, and megalomaniac president should understand that this is wrong.
Ambassador Saab, you know, it is it is common knowledge that there are two powers they say that elephants have two kinds of teeth: those with which you eat and those with which you show. So the real teeth are not the tusks. So Pakistan has two centers of power: Islamabad and Rawalpindi, and we know that the real power is in Rawalpindi, where the military base is. Why have Indian ministers, prime ministers, etc., all of those who have made their overtures, they have made their overtures to the Pakistani civil governments, people like Nawaz Sharif and others. But that's where the military immediately subverts their own government's efforts to reach out to India, or prevents their own government from responding to positive overtures from India. But if you notice, the United States seems to have a much better military to military relations with Pakistan than civil. I mean, and the height of it was Donald Trump inviting Asim Munir to the White House, and neither Shehbaz Sharif nor Zardari, the president, have ever visited that. Why hasn't India tried to make an overture towards the Pakistani military? Is it because the Indian military is a bit depoliticized?
There are many reasons, and I should explain those as clearly as possible. In the case of the United States, Pakistan was an ally. It was an ally in the Cold War.
Sure.
It was an ally in the global jihad. It was an ally when the Taliban came to rule. It has been an ally. It's a military ally. So it's a very different relationship that goes back to the dawn of independence. And it is a very important relationship to both sides. It's a military relationship. It is, and I would say to you very candidly that the Americans completely support the present political order, which is controlled by the armed forces.
Yes.
The United States has a long record of supporting authoritarian rulers abroad and military rulers if they can get them, because this is the way they are able to ensure that their political interests are served by that authoritarian ruler. And Pakistan is not different in this regard. Whether the armed forces are ruling in Islamabad or they are in confined to a Rawalpindi makes no difference whatsoever. Everybody knows that the armed forces rule the country, and the Americans don't need any lessons in that regard. Where it comes to India, there is no way in this scenario that there can be military to military. In our situation, the armed forces serve at the will of the civilian leadership. It's a fundamentally different political order, and I would be very seriously concerned if any general in India started having his own foreign policy and made overtures to various people. Having said this, let me now clarify. Having said this, I want you to remember that during Dr. Manmohan Singh's rule, he initiated what is referred to in South Asian parlance as the back channel approach.
Yeah.
The special envoy in Mr. Sati Lamba and the Pakistani leadership had appointed their own national security advisor, Mr. Tariq Aziz, and they had a very substantial relationship with which the armed forces were also well informed. But do recall here that who ruined that initiative? It is the Mumbai attack.
Yeah.
The Mumbai. Now, India is not obsessional, nor is it erroneous when we say that the Pakistani armed forces are directly and actively involved in cross border terror. And they were directly and actively involved with the assault upon Mumbai. The Mumbai assault, which killed over 300 people, wanton violence at several targets, and several people murdered in cold blood. It was a spectacle which was horrific. So, this is the way they have functioned. How do you expect an Indian to go forward? And even then, Prime Minister Modi invited the Pakistani Prime Minister to Delhi in 2014 and visited Islamabad. 2016, you find the attack on the Indian armed forces, the Indian security forces, and many of them get killed. And then, of course, the relationship goes downhill. So
But
every time we try, there is no way that we are able to talk to the. Now, our conviction is, and I will repeat the point I made earlier, that the Pakistani armed forces are not coming to the discussion as military officers. They are also coming to us as power brokers in their country who have benefited enormously through
Right.
their power. They run corporations in the country. Many of them have become multimillionaires. Many of them own huge plots of land. They are a privileged elite in their country. And therefore, there is no way our assessment is that they would like to give up all this and allow their country to become a normal country.
Obviously, restoring the military civil society balance is going to take a revolution in Pakistan. But of course, there was this example of Ajit Doval having a back channel discussions with Bajwa, the previous chief of staff Pakistani, and negotiating a ceasefire across a line of control, which lasted for several years, I think, until Operation Sindoor, so that ceasefire was holding. Let me turn towards China a little bit. Do you see that over the past few years, the relationship between India and China had deteriorated, even though they were continuing to trade? We live in a very strange period where enemies trade with each other. I mean, if you look at the US and China's trade relations, in spite of geopolitical tensions and competition. So even though India and China's trade has increased significantly, India was having geopolitical problems with China. And now, with these current efforts that are being made, a kind of a reset button is being pressed from the Indian side. I don't know to what extent China is also reciprocating. Do you see that India will be able to overcome the lack of trust with China, the different problems that they've had with China, salami slicing and the border issues and China's support for Pakistan and Bangladesh? Do you see that this is a promising diplomatic venture for India?
India's security establishment has a very good understanding of the challenge we face from China. China is a neighbor with which we have an undemarcated border of over 3,000 kilometers. We also have, it is a rising power in our neighborhood. It is therefore expanding its influence in many of the countries that are in South Asia. It is also expanding its presence in the Indian Ocean. Obviously, the rise of China has had significant ramifications both in the Asian context or Eurasian context and in the global context. India is aware of this. Where I part company from some of my colleagues is where they come up with the solution. And their knee jerk solution was, let's get into the American embrace. This is wrong. My own sense is what happened in 2020 is a direct result of a perception of the Chinese security establishment that India or Indian authorities have given up on their commitment to strategic autonomy and are possibly irrevocably aligned with the United States. Witness over here, the if you were sitting and you were a little paranoid in Beijing, what would you see? You would see the Indians building up a very substantial relationship with the United States, which you have talked about. I
Yes.
myself watched it with deep concern because of the signals that it would give to many other countries. I believe partly that may have encouraged the Chinese to build up their ties with Pakistan and also to keep a very wary eye upon us. This was not a scenario that we should have allowed to happen. Recall just a few years earlier, we were members of the Russia, India, China conclave. We were members of BRICS. We later became partner. We became members later on at the SCO. There were numerous meetings between our Prime Minister and President Xi Jinping. We had a very healthy approach to each other as neighbors. Concerned, yes, but not enemies. I believe that we gave a series of wrong signals by affiliating ourselves with the Quad, with talking the language that they was very hostile to the America, to the Chinese, allowing the then administration, particularly the Secretary of State Pompeo, and of course Donald Trump himself used very, very racist and hostile language with regard to the Chinese, and we were seen to be complicit in this. I believe that the problem of Ladakh possibly has its source in this. This can be corrected. And I think India from 2021 has done a lot of correction. We have at that time the Quad was very seriously engaged in a security confrontation with the Chinese, largely due to the Indian input. I think that has been toned down quite significantly. And I think over a period of time, as far as India is concerned, the Quad will have very little value. What we are building up now is that this is seen as an aberration. What we are looking at now is to see the basis on which we can reset a very important relationship. I believe the Russians are also committed to that. They would like to go back to the scenario we had earlier. They have spoken about the revival of the dialogue at the RIC, the Russia India China dialogue. This has been also said by the Chinese spokesperson. India has remained low key. You see, we have an ongoing issue at the border. And what we are looking for is that if the Chinese would like to take the relationship forward, there has been a lot of good progress on the border, but not enough. There's also been a goodwill gesture from the Indian side, and we have built our economic ties. We are also looking at new opportunities of investments and joint ventures. I think we are on the right track. China also has to reciprocate and understand that there are important changes that have taken place in India, and that they should understand that even if they thought at that time that India has got too far to the other side, I think we have done a lot to correct that impression. And I think the Chinese should now make certain gestures from their part or on their part so that confidence would be built up and we could have a substantial engagement. If you recall, even during the peak of the Cold War, there was a platform for dialogue like the Helsinki process, and there was a lot of agreement with regard to nuclear weapons, etc. We don't have that kind of hostility with the Chinese. We don't have a revival of the new Cold War. We don't have a new Cold War. We have a concern in Washington with regard to the rise of what they see as a challenge to their hegemony. By the way, there are no takers for hegemony today. This is United States pipe dream, and I would say that overwhelmingly countries both in Europe and in Eurasia and in Africa would robustly call for a multipolar world order. The United States the main change that is required in mindset is in the United States. Please give up this business of hegemony. You've been there long enough. You've done enough damage. Look at the hundreds of thousands of people that the Americans have killed as a unipolar power. Look at what they have done, the devastation in Afghanistan and the devastation in Iraq and in Libya. This is a lasting legacy of the unipolar world order, and I think the world doesn't want to have any of that anymore.
I want to turn to some comments that you made in the beginning that we are in a gray zone at the moment, and India is in a moment of self-reflection and pondering some of its strategic options, its long-term priorities, and perhaps very soon a new foreign policy will emerge. So I let's say that by some freak luck, this video is watched by the Prime Minister of India. And if you had to give 3 suggestions or advice or tips to the Prime Minister of India for a new foreign policy going forward, what would be those 3 suggestions, Ambassador?
I would say number 1, we should re-engage with China. Re-engage with China as part of a strategic process. Engage at summit level, engage at ministerial level, but more importantly, engage at officials level. Let them come up with ideas as to how we could take the relationship forward and ideas as to how some of the sensitivities could be addressed. We should have a candid discussion on this. Number 2, I would say we should revive the platform of the RIC. Russia, India, and China, that constitutes a very significant platform. I would say to you as an aside, Russia's presence in a trilateral engagement serves to moderate China. If China is left on its own, there will be a sense of asymmetry in India. But when you are talking in a trilateral platform, you will find that some of the sharp edges with regard to asymmetry, with regard to the sense of challenge or the sense of threat, differences, etc., they can be moderated. And I am therefore a very strong supporter of the RIC. Number three, I would say very clearly, we must maintain a dialogue with the Americans. The Americans have provoked us quite significantly. They have referred to our economy as a dead economy. They have entertained the Pakistani army chief in the White House after, very soon after we had this horrendous experience of the Pahalgam massacre. I would say that India should show maturity in this regard. We don't sulk. We should show maturity that there is a as my colleague Mr. Navtej Sarna said recently, there is a United States beyond Trump, and there is a life in the United States after Trump. Even Trump is not someone who is he could change his mind anytime, but I'm there for the long game. Relationship, strategic partnership, strategic vision, the word strategic itself refers to a long term approach. The United States has no cognizance of this. If many of its officials make extremely foolish remarks, and you are embarrassed. Mr. Peter Navarro wrote an article in the Financial Times about justifying why we have tariffs. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment for anyone who reads it. Does this man have a minimum clue about international affairs? I mean, he blames India for the war in Ukraine. What about the $150 billion of weapons that the West has given Ukraine? What about the American intervention when you had an agreement in March 2021, and the American intervention ensured that that agreement was not implemented? So if the war has occurred in Ukraine, the United States is directly responsible for encouraging it, for making it inevitable, for pushing, knowing full well. Biden, in his public statement in June 2021, stated that for, for Putin, it is a red line. I mean, NATO membership for Ukraine is a red line. And if I was in his place, I would think exactly that. So
Yes, I
let us
mean,
be very clear.
no
And
doubt
I
about
would
it.
say that the United States should take a fresh look. But we are a mature nation. We are an ancient civilization. We have a lot of gravitas, and our interlocutor may not have it, but we have it. And we should continue to engage with wide sections of the American establishment, the business, the think tanks, and even I would say political leaders, even though many of them, because the United States is a polarized country.
Yeah.
There are large sections of the United, as you yourself pointed out, even Republicans are very unhappy. Look at the way the United States has behaved in Gaza, giving a blank check to a murderous regime led by Netanyahu, which has mercilessly killed about 62, 63,000 people and is today starving that population to death. Are they the hallmarks of a great power that wants to retain its hegemony in world affairs? I would say this is not acceptable. But we are mature. We will deal with various sections of the American establishment, not through churlishness. We will not call them names, but that would be my last recommendation. So, number one, that we must deal with China, engage with China. Number two, revive the RIC. And number three, engage with large sections of the American establishment and hope for that period when there will be good sense in the White House and in the political establishment.
When it comes to Gaza, and India has not exactly shrouded itself in moral glory, Ambassador Saab, but we will talk about that some other day. But I really, really want to thank you very much for coming on the show and speaking with such candor and such deep analysis and understanding of foreign policy. And I think it is very important that not only policymakers in Delhi, but policymakers in Washington, D.C. also listen to your analysis. They may agree, they may not agree, but it is important to understand, because you're not only bringing an objective analysis, but you're also bringing the Indian perspective at the same time. So I think it is. I'm absolutely delighted to have spoken to you on this particular issue. So So thank you very much for coming on
Thank you
Conversations.
very much, Professor. Always a pleasure to sit with you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.